All right, it's so nice to see you getting back into place. Great. I'm sure a lot transpired in your groups. Great. So what we're going to do is hear some questions. I'll check in with Lateefah and Boots and see if they want to respond immediately or for collective view and then talk. And we'll kind of play this by ear and see what happens, but we're eager to hear what's on your minds. So here we go. You let people know that you have a question and they'll come with the microphone. Thanks.
I think we have a question down right.
Thank you.
Okay, the question is, how do we create solutions with people that are the complete opposite of you? And then also, understanding human nature a little bit and the tribalism that's there. How do we engage the opposition? How do we expand the tribe?
Okay, great. Let's hear some more.
We have a question upright.
Our questions were, what is the new ideology that is necessary to unite all of the groups? What are we willing to give up for unified struggle? Or how do we reframe that question so it's what do we all gain? And how do we corral the current energy to put it towards collective action?
Great. We'll hear one or two more. Yeah? A hand? There's one. Great.
Thank you. The question is, how do we call upon the labor movement, as you had suggested, as women, when it feels like that movement has so much male domination? Just a little help with that. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So, all right. So why don't we pause and take in these questions? And is there, either of you ready to go? Want to go, Boots? Ready?
Yeah. So I'll go in reverse of the questions. I don't think we should call upon the labor movement as it exists right now. The labor movement as it exists right now only represents 7% of the workforce. Although there are some great folks that are working within it right now, it is not, in order for a radical labor movement to win, it has to break laws, namely the Taft-Hartley law. You have to be able to have solidarity strikes. And so that means that's one reason why it would have to be led by radicals, is because it would have to be people that are organizing for a loftier goal than just that particular win. But so I think that may be the answer to my idea in regards to the patriarchal way that the labor movement is existing right now, is that we need to create new movements that utilize the withholding of labor. That doesn't necessarily mean or discount working with the existing unions that are right now, but we need to create new radical movements that use those tactics, that create whatever you want to call them, new movements or something else that represents those radical ideas, that including smashing patriarchy.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's great. Lateefah?
I love that answer. And then I'm thinking about the Labor Fed in Alameda County is run by Josie Camacho, who's a 5'3" Filipina, and she's amazing. And you cannot pass her. Now that's a small example, but you're right. And the person who posed the question is right in terms of the percentage of organized labor and the leadership. But I think of, now, being in, having radical politics, but now kind of being in elected office and in an office that no one knew existed. Like mosquito abatement board? No, it's actually BART Board. But some of the most powerful unions in the country, while only a small percentage of workers are represented, are off the backs of people of color and women. The CTA, for instance, SEIU, 10 to 1, 790. And I'm saying names because, again, when I always go back to thinking about Kev in the hospital, he was kept alive by women of color who were there 24/7 when doctors came in for 10 minutes. It was actually organized that this hospital was going to be run by underpaid people. And we have a long way to go, but especially for the sisters in the audience, when we see illegitimate acts happening in the workforce, take that motherfucker's job. Yes. Whether it be elected office or the person in the C-suite, I just think jobs should be taken. And again, there's this idea of, well, you're still operating under sort of this capitalist superdome. Yeah, that's actually where I'm living today. The beautiful piece is to have visionaries who can act. So there takes folks, why I love you so much and been listening to you. I'm now old, so then you must be old. Yeah. But I've been listening to you since middle school.
Yeah,
but in one
old.
In one talk you said years ago, I'm just really playing with you, because it's such an honor to be on stage with you. I love you so much.
Somewhere about.
But he said, and it wasn't in a song, but you said, if you can dream about justice, you must believe in God, because we've never seen it. And it was years ago, but it was so practical. You must believe, maybe it was like, yes, we've never seen it, meaning that you have to be.
I want to take credit for that.
Supernatural, amazing. So if we're thinking all of these questions and all the conversations that we've had today, you think about the warriors that we've paid homage to. We follow them because they can see something very practical that we can't see in the right now. Some of us are in the right now, trying to get this food. The woman who is cleaning literally across the street at the Marriott a room, and she's being paid probably $16 less than she should be an hour. We have not given her the opportunity and space to dream about justice because she's trying to make sure that her children are not deported. But so us who have this amazing privilege and power as a vocation to dream about justice, let's create those pathways. So we can take over the labor movement, and we absolutely can expand the labor movement, and we absolutely can take people out of elected office by the vote or by deep, deep resistance. And so we're there, and culture makes that resistance irresistible.
So Lateefah just did something magnificent, which was to take us into something incredibly specific about action. Take that job. And dream. And that these things are not either or, but a necessity of each other. And it's really, really important for us to have heard that. Let's come back to some more questions from you guys.
Okay, so my group and I wanted to ask you two how can we express movement in our everyday life with a global impact?
Oh, let's stay on that one for a minute. Thank you. Can you say it one more time?
Yeah, how do we express movement in our everyday lives with a global impact?
All right.
Can I get clarification on it a little bit?
On the question?
Yes.
Yeah, so
I don't know where you are.
So okay.
We can't quite see you. Wave your hands.
Oh,
over
there you go. Okay.
All right. Good.
I think after hearing Lateefah speak, it was more of a because in her life she moved a lot. So where she is in her life has a global impact. So how can we do that in our everyday life?
Can either of you speak to that, or you want to hear something?
I mean, I still don't have good credit. I mean, it's like, so I don't know if I'm the one to answer that question. But what is really, what's interesting is, I think sometimes we just fall into where the universe wants us to be. And it's not about vocation necessarily, it's about where you are. When those cowards with those tiki torches from Home Depot went to Charlottesville and folks were enraged all over the country, and I think you should be enraged, but there's one of them at your Thanksgiving table, I almost promise you. Not mine, but many people. And when we talk about global impact and we talk about scale, I want us always to think about that frame that we're using. Yeah, it's important to impact people on a global scale, but it's also important to check the racist dude on the bus who won't get up for that woman with her stroller, right? And so to have political and moral courage, you shouldn't and we shouldn't be thinking about just doing it so people can see it, right? How do you live it in every single thing? And then when you don't and when you're human and you fuck up, who's going to be the one with courage to hold you to make you better for tomorrow? Global scale and the big job at, the Sierra Club or the ACLU, those are my folks. But who, to me, is making the deepest impact every single day is that amazing daycare worker who opens up her door in the morning and allows single mothers to work. If we think about the personal and political being systemic, as being rooted deeply in the communities that we're in, we could be better people to one another. Right? We could just be better people. It takes that thing. It takes that little thing to make one person, one family more free. For you to actually harbor a family who is dealing with deportation, absolutely, that is global.
So I'd like to add on to that. And what I would say, if that is the goal, to have a global impact, and definitely for me, I think that's something that I look for. You have to start somewhere, and first of all, the first place you start is you can't do it by yourself. You have to join an organization.
Yep.
You have to join an organization with a program, with a platform that has with strategy on how these problems are going to happen. And that program and platform can be local, and you'd be surprised at the effect it has globally. When we did that, the shutdown in Oakland at the Occupy Oakland shutdown of the ports. Just after that, the coup had a tour, and we were in Rome, and we play at this squat called Strike in Rome, and next to it was always this factory that built and repaired train cars, and they had a contentious relationship. But at a certain point, the workers in that factory went on strike. They took over the factory, and they went and they started working with that squat. And we came through, and we had a show, and the folks from the squat were like, "Hey, you want to go see the factory next door? They've taken it over. They're trying to figure out what to do next." So we went, we did a tour, and all this sort of stuff, and it's being translated to me, and they had taken it over. They were going in shifts, and they were being attacked. And there was and at some point, I asked them, "So what are you going to do now? You've taken this thing over, and where can you go? What can you do? Are you going to sell parts to Venezuela? How are you going to work this?" And then they started talking to each other, and then they went to the people from the squad, and they were talking kind of, in a stressed out tone. Then they came back to me and we said, well, they told us you were from Occupy Oakland, and they told us that they used the example of Occupy Oakland to tell us that we should take over this factory and that you were going to be here. So that's what we're asking you. And the answer to what happens next is a lot more complicated, but the point is, and I was seeing that all over Europe. Like, first of all, here people were like, oh, you know, they always do strikes in Europe. We should do that sort of thing. We should take things over. That's what they're doing in Europe. And at all of these cities in Europe, they were looking to what was happening in Oakland as an example. Like, students were like, we're taking over schools. They were, you know, and I would say that the larger problem is there was no larger organization to really have a strategy and a platform for all these actions to mean anything. But it also went to Nigeria. Nigeria, a month and a half after Occupy Oakland and name-checking Occupy Oakland, they had Occupy Nigeria and shut down the whole country. And that was over the oil prices that where they heat their houses, and they won. You know, it's also a complicated story, but they won a victory. And every business in Nigeria was shut down, and they called it Occupy Nigeria, and it got sold out, but they did win a victory. But the point is that if you find a path to victory, everybody's so hungry for that.
Yeah.
That when they see it, they will try to duplicate it, modify it, make it better. And so that is a way to have a global impact.
I'm quite struck by where you both have gone. For those that were here at the beginning of the day, and Bamudi asked, how do we rebuild the moral infrastructure? Our moral infrastructure. I feel in these stories, we're hearing both the really personal one, the way you behave on the bus, the way you open the door, the way you practice every day, but also this bigger one, joining organizations, getting help, participating in that. It's really nice to return to his thoughts. Can we get some more of your thoughts?
We have one upstairs at the
you.
terrace to your right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi. My question's a bit of a corollary to Boots's question. I wonder, how can we actually envision the workings of an economy and culture that meet all people's basic needs and also their needs for safety, dignity, and belonging?
Thank you. I'm going to take a few more and let people ponder the depth of that for a minute, or do you want to jump on it, either of you? You want to go right away, Boots? Go ahead.
So one of my first organizing experiences was when I was a teenager. I was helping with the Watsonville cannery workers strike and another farm workers union that was happening in Delano and McFarland, not the UFW. And there were these issues of racism that was coming up between Filipino workers, Mexican workers, and Portuguese workers. And before that, I had been involved in a lot of long meetings and talks about how to push racist ideas out of your mind and how to better interact with people. But nothing I found saw more effective than the Portuguese workers and Mexican workers needing to join together to win this strike. And having a reason to talk about ways in which they treated each other, because otherwise they were all going to lose. And so I think that sometimes we need that struggle for something more to put those questions into a context that makes it more relevant for people to it's kind of like if you're eating sugar all the time and people are like, you're going to get diabetes, but all of a sudden you have diabetes, then you start acting because it's right here and right now. And so so I feel like some of these struggles where they have these material outcomes that will change based on our actions around those things, they intensify those questions in a way that allows them to be handled. That being said, I don't know, but.
I was just gonna say, I have no idea, but what I do know, I have no idea. I mean, she asked this question about like world peace. Like, I don't know, but how can we be better to one another is simply the summary, right, of that question. And how can people sort of lay down their burdens and love thy neighbor? That question is one that we have to ask ourselves. I don't know how in this city that people can walk over dying people who are dying in their own waste and we just pass a $10 billion budget for 12 months for this city. I don't know. Actually, I don't know. I don't know in this city. For the reason why I got into this movement, I was in and out of high school, and I dropped out, and I was working at Taco Bell for 8 hours a day, and it wasn't a social service agency who brought me into the movement. It was a sister, Crea Gomez, who said, I found this organization, and you should be doing this work, and my life is forever changed. And we were working with our sisters on the streets who were literally bartering sex for housing, bartering sex for drugs, so that they could quell the horrible memories of what happened to them in their homes when the best institutions downtown that were supposed to support them ended up putting them in cages because they were being trafficked in this city that for as long as I can remember has had multi-billion-dollar budgets, has put children in cages, and we've legislated and made it happen. So the question in one of the most liberal, not progressive, liberal spaces in the world, we still step over dying men and jail girls who have been trafficked for their bodies and put them in cages. So we have a long way to go before we answer that question. There are many philosophical and religious texts that tell us how to do it, but as long as capital becomes the North Star, continues to be the North Star, we continue stepping over bodies. I have a long way to go.
I have to tell you that I'm very aware of the time, and we're going to need to close very soon. Is there a burning question out here?
We've got one up center.
Thank you. We'll hear that one, and then you each can have some time to reflect a little bit. Yes.
Hi, thanks so much for coming in. I'll sit. But, this is a synthesis of our group's discussion that was inspired by both of your presentations. First question is, how might we create alternative structures of power or human interaction, whether returning to social or cultural practices we've been forgotten or been coerced to forget, or collaboratively growing new practices? So how might we create alternative structures of power or human interaction? The second question is, how does movement interact with power? What can we learn from the physics of movement? For example, inertia can mean not moving, the power to stop, the momentum to continue, or change in speed or direction.
So, thank you. You can respond to the individual questions or use the time just to kind of bring yourselves to some kind of closure. We only have a couple minutes. Okay, thank you. Thank you for those questions.
So before I turn it over to Boots, because I have no idea, you know that woman that I talked about, Miss Pierce, her daughter is in the audience. Zayed, where are you at? If you could stand
Bring
up.
the house back up. Yeah.
Zayed, stand up.
We want to see. Thank you. House lights up.
My preschool best friend.
There you are. Where are you? There.
And I call you out and I apologize because the historical marrow, the ancestor marrow that exists in all of us, if we can call on it consistently, it keeps us moving in the darkest of times. And if you watch footage of great migrations, we talked about that earlier, I'm so fascinated by the Syrian migration and the plight of that people. Nobody wanted them. Nobody. Very few people want to look in the face of a Palestinian beyond the border. Folks don't want people who are dying to survive, even though they say that they are friends, right? So us who have got this amazing opportunity and privilege to be about talking and working on these things of peace, of fair economy, for me, I get to spend all day working at a foundation where we give resources to fight racism. Hella lucky, right? Akanadi Foundation is amazing. And at night, I get to worry about a railroad, right? That has a lot of problems. But those problems that we're all addressing actually have to do with individuals who are just trying to live. I want us, as culture makers, as thinkers, as theorists, as activists, as folks who are trying to feed our babies, and everybody in between, to think about what life would be like if we could live beyond survival. What, beyond survival, like beyond survival. Last thing that I will say, when I was growing up in this city, Black people made up about 13% of the population. Of the 3% that remain here, 97% of people of African diaspora not only live below the poverty level, but are in low-income housing projects. So only 3% of Black people can pay market rate rent. In Oakland, California, in Alameda County, over 50%, we think 53% of African American men are unemployed. If we were our white counterparts, there would be a revolution in the streets. And I think that there should be. So once we can get beyond survival and collectively look at what if by the salience of your face, you could not work. And as you go outside and as we eat tonight, you look at who is in front of the house. They don't look like the people that I just talked about by design. And those are individual decisions, not just systematic. If you are a manager, who are you hiring? Who are you firing? If you are opening up doors for culture and opportunity, who can come in? We make individual decisions that become systemic, that become systematic, that become policy because we vote people in office who think like us. So let's change it all.
Can I make that be the last word, Boots, or do you have one more thing you would like to say?
I do have one more thing.
Go for it. I'm giving you the floor.
People have, in answer to that question about could we just create these alternative systems, I'm paraphrasing, people have been doing that for a long time, and they work to a certain extent for the people that are in that. At the most, right? Matter of fact, there's a Christian communist commune that's been going on since the 30s. They got a whole town in northern New York. They're called the Bruderhof, and I've been there. And yeah, they used to put out a magazine called Blue Magazine. That was a hip hop magazine, and hasn't helped people outside of that town. Here's the other thing, though. It's also not as much of a threat as long as it's small. I believe that we should keep what was also brought up is indigenous cultures of the past and hopefully of the present, that we keep going. Now, what we have to realize is that in and of itself won't stop it, because many of those cultures were stamped out because of capitalism, because capitalism keeps going. So we can't ignore it because it keeps growing. It keeps coming back on us. We can't create these things. And besides that town that I thought, there's been communes happening since, through the whole 20th century. And the whole idea is there a way to not have class struggle? And the answer is no. And that's what those experiments were trying to ask. Can we not have class struggle? Can we just do it an easier way? And, and is it just about, can we just change the way we live? And yes, we can change the way we live, but we have to change the material conditions
That's right.
that dictate the way that we live.
That's right.
Culture comes from people creating ways to survive. Fishing villages make fishing songs, right? We can't just tell a fishing village, start singing agricultural songs, and then everything will be agricultural. We have to change the material conditions that create our culture in the first place. And then we can more effectively do that other work, or at the same time.
That's right.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So, everybody, just before we, yes,
You're amazing.
give it up for them. They're awesome, amazing, amazing. If the first session was somewhat about story, I believe what we've been hearing this rest of this, there's been so much rage and so much inspiration both, and our task of harvesting both of those and not to let go of either of them. You really have filled us with so much. And can we just take Miss Pierce's amazing movement to end our session? You are so beautiful as you spoke about her, but also if you see how much beautiful, glorious movement comes out of Lateefah. But if you remember way at the beginning, she talked about Miss Pierce, and she said, just thanks to Miss Pierce. And here's what she did. Just this. So everybody bring your hands in, and we're going to take them up, take them up, take them up. Bring into your heart all those ancestors, all those great teachers, and these amazing people. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.